Welcome to BIV Today, the podcast from the newsroom of Business in Vancouver. I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief. My guest today really needs little introduction to Canadians. He's been a federal party leader, a premier, a cabinet minister over well more than 3 decades in public life, punctuated by time in the private sector. Jean Charest has chosen this time, of course, to return to politics, to seek the conservative leadership, aiming to steer the party into a more centrist position to make it more electable against Justin Trudeau's Liberals. It's not an easy path, even for someone with his credentials, and MP Pierre Poilievre has been garnering a lot of attention in this race as Charest's principal foe. But let's understand more about Jean Charest now. He joins me. Good to see you.
Thanks. Thank you for hosting me, Kirk.
Well, I think I met you on the day you were appointed the federal fitness and amateur sport minister.
Of course, I was a high-level athlete back then and still am.
Yeah, well, I think you said you had a couple of young kids that kept you fit. You've had all these roles. Why return now?
Canada has been the story and the passion and the common thread of my political life. I see the country badly divided, frankly, very balkanized. It's probably as bad as it was in the early 80s and below our potential economically, certainly on the international stage. And Canadians look to the Conservative Party of Canada as being the alternative and the national alternative. So I'm running because I'm very much a conservative. I'm not a hyphenated conservative. I don't, excuse me, I'm not trying to bring the party back, or I believe in certain conservative values. I have the deep conviction that I can, of course, unite this party and make it win, which it needs to do after 3 consecutive defeats.
What's necessary for the Conservatives to prove to Canadians in this contest that perhaps they didn't prove in the election?
Well, and it's interesting as a question because we didn't, Mr. Trudeau didn't really win the last campaign. Most Conservatives would admit that they lost the campaign. And what we have to do is present really a national vision, first of all, on the economy. We're the party of the economy, policies that promote economic growth. In the resource sector in particular, where Canada is lacking, we've had an approach that hasn't allowed us to get anything done, or certainly not big projects done. And I'm a big believer in the resource sector, including oil, gas, pipelines, mining. And we also need fiscal conservatism coming out of COVID. We've spent a lot of money, and we have a government that's very good at spending. I mean, I'll give them that. I mean, they get first prize on the spending side. But on the side of balancing the books and getting our fiscal house in order, that's now become the order of the day. We have to do that in an orderly fashion. The third thing I'd say is that we do need to find our voice internationally. That includes defense policy. It includes issues where we need to be a stronger presence in the world. And on all those counts, people look as the Conservatives. Now, the Conservatives are the party that bridge East and West. And when we have formed national government, we've had the ability to get big things done. Well, the people now look at us and they ask us, are you up to it? Can you guys do this job? Can you produce a leader who will be the adult in the room, which is the other thing we hear on the campaign trail.
Mr. Manning has been on record in the last couple of days saying that his worry is that the party is splitting kind of an east-west chasm again. Are you seeing that happen?
There are variations in east and west, but what else is new? I mean, we've had that forever together. In my experience, Kirk, has been very positive because in my experience, Albertans and people from Quebec or Saskatchewan, they do want to sit at the same table. Their ambition isn't to be apart, but you need a government that compels them towards a common vision, and we haven't seen that with Mr. Trudeau.
You've had so many endeavors in your public life. You've done so many different things. But I wonder if you would be able to choose one that you would say uniquely qualifies you now to run this party. Is it something that you experienced or accomplished over these last number of decades that you think makes you the guy?
I participated in the 95 referendum, which you'll remember, and you may have a younger audience who may not, but in 95, we came very, very, very close to losing our country. I mean, this isn't a small, thing. country breaking apart is a big deal. We came at 0.50% with 93% of eligible voters voting in that referendum campaign. So that obviously defined. And then I went on to lead the Liberal Party in Quebec, which much like British Columbia, I mean, in British Columbia, the Liberal Party is a coalition party. In Quebec, it's a coalition of federalists, and pushed back on the referendum that Lucien Bouchard wanted to do by getting a mandate in a 98 campaign. And that was an interesting campaign because at the end of it, the last part, I campaigned only on the idea of no referendum. Lucien Bouchard won a majority of the seats, but we won a plurality of the votes. And that the referendum idea died on that night, and the country was allowed to breathe. That was, for me, the most important campaign, Kirk, that I ever was part of. Wasn't the one I won, it's the one I lost, but where Canada won.
So you mentioned Lucien Bouchard, and people recall him as really a very ardent nationalist, separatist, premier of Quebec.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, of course, preceding that, he was a pretty formidable environment minister, and the Mulroney government that you were part of was really well known in the world for staking out some interesting areas for conservatives, not necessarily what people first expect. I want to ask you about how it is that you've been able to shape your own vision of environmental policy, particularly as it comes to how it is that we're going to capture carbon and tax carbon going forward to get to this net zero economy by 2040, 2050, somewhere in there. What would have been the ingredients for you here?
And your remark about conservatives and the environment's interesting. Conservatives, it pains me, have not claimed their legacy. Conservatives did the Montreal Protocol, which is the most successful environmental treaty in the world. We did the Clean Air Act for the United States on SO2 emissions in 1990, extremely successful. And conservatives produced the Green Plan. I was in Rio in 92 when we did we signed the Climate Change Convention, and we then went on to a period where we had all these COP meetings where we put out more press releases on targets than actually meeting targets. And the approach I take is a lesson on that. So I'm proposing a comprehensive approach that deals with carbon capture and storage, biofuels, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, small modular reactors. We need nuclear power to get to zero emissions in 2050, which is the overarching objective. And I propose that we substitute the consumption carbon tax with a price on carbon on large emitters, which was done in Quebec with a carbon trading system with California, what works fairly well. But I want to do it in a way that will allow us to meet the objectives in an orderly fashion and really reduce carbon emissions, which we all agree on. And I sincerely believe that that kind of approach will be more successful than just putting out another press release.
It's one area that the Conservatives clearly have to persuade Canadians that they're serious about, right?
Yes.
The other area I think would be around many social policies. And I think that this is where Canadians found themselves quite confused in the last couple of years with the Conservatives, because it appeared as if, again, there was a more of a social conservatism in the last leadership race that then somehow got modulated around election time, but still had some bits hanging out there.
Yeah.
What do you think is necessary around social policy, and again, for the Conservatives to be positioned in an electable way?
Well, let's talk about families and daycare. You know, when I was elected to Quebec, when I went to Quebec politics in 98, I'm a fiscal conservative. I was very skeptical about Quebec's daycare programs, and I got roundly criticized for it. But you know what, Kirk? I ended up being convinced because of the effect of the program, which economically makes sense. I would support the daycare agreements that have been signed between the federal government and the provinces, and I would enhance it by increasing the tax credit to families who don't use the public system, increase it by 75%. I would allow parents on parental leave to earn up to $20,000 without being clawed back to reintegrate them into the labor market. I would take federal taxes off parental leave money that parents receive. I would allow a mother to receive the child tax credit as of the third month of pregnancy. I would do more. And why? Because it makes economic sense. What I saw in Quebec is that the participation rate of women was very low and went to among the highest in the world. It brought down poverty, allowed to increase actually the birth rate. And these are all the positive outcomes we got with an aging population. It makes economic sense when you get it right. So those are the type of things that we need to think through and get right if we want people to vote for us.
It seems with childcare that this is the slowest moving national program maybe of all time. I mean, I think we could start building another railway and make it go faster, right?
I do not wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, but why does it take so long?
Well, because people are not, I think they need to be convinced. They see the big ticket item, they see the price, and then they don't see anything else. I mean, they can't get beyond the headline price. When in fact, what you do see is more women in the labor market, families who are actually better off because both parents, and by the way, all based on choice. I mean, we're not forcing anyone to make any choice they don't want to make. But the biggest obstacle, I think we have to start with the understanding that the biggest obstacle for a family in deciding whether they're going to have children or not, one of the biggest, is the access and affordability of daycare. And if you don't address that issue, you're creating an environment where that's an obstacle to having more children. And we have an aging population, and we need more people. You know, Stephen Poloz, who was a governor of the Bank of Canada, put out a book about the age of uncertainty, in which he makes exactly that case, that you'll increase productivity if you get the design of these programs right. So getting beyond the headline is a challenge.
Is one of the issues, though, also that as a country, we're still having a lot of trouble in particular jurisdictions, and I'd include British Columbia in this, trying to figure out what belongs as a public sector program, what belongs as a privatized program, or as a mixture, as a hybrid. And you can carry that, of course, into the health sector in all of this. And I guess what Canadians will wonder about too is, where are you around issues involving private healthcare, particularly as the population ages, and where very clearly we're going to have shortages in the public system to accommodate that aging population?
Well, we're coming out of COVID. There's a lot of lessons to be drawn. We really have to have a hard look at our healthcare systems across the country to figure out what we need to change. And going into COVID, our healthcare system was already in bad shape, and all the metrics are pretty low. And even though we're proud of it, we're proud of the fact that it's a right to have access to healthcare. I would change the Canada Health Act, Kirk, which has been, put up as a sacred cow for a very long time. I would open it up to allow provinces to experiment with new models of delivery and using the private sector. I would maintain the single payer. So that means that you would not have to put your hand in your pocket if you're going to the hospital or a clinic. But I would definitely open it up so that we could have more of that resource on the private side. The example I keep using is a knee and hip replacement clinic. Government could very well conclude an agreement with the clinic and a group of doctors. They do diagnostic operations, post-op and rehab, and be paid a set amount per patient. They'd be more efficient, they'd be more specialized, and you would free up beds in hospitals for cases that are more complex. That's the kind of area in which we need to move if we're going to be. Do more to recognize credentials within Canada of nurses and doctors, but also outside for new Canadians, so that we stop putting roadblocks up for those people who come to our country and can help us deliver healthcare, but then are sent back to school instead.
People, I think, perceive you as a moderate man, someone who doesn't raise his voice terribly much. So I'm going to risk getting your blood pressure going today. Let's talk about your opponent in this, right? Because it is getting personal between you and Mr. Poilievre. Why do you worry about him in this country?
Well, he's the front runner in this campaign, by the way. And I'm the underdog in this campaign, which is fine. That's been, all my life I've been the underdog. I keep, reminding the media that I'm not good at winning polls. I'm better at winning election campaigns, which is also an issue in this race. I have a general concern. Let's keep it general, that Canada has a choice of going down the route of American style politics, of division and polarization and hot button issues and sloganism, attack dogs. Now, this may be okay for Americans. They may survive it all. I have no appetite for it at all. But we're Canada. We want to be, we're Canadians. And I want us to practice politics in the way that is consistent with our values and who we are. We're not Americans. And by the way, American style politics, which at its base opposes one group to the other, would be very damaging to our country. I mean, it would be very damaging. So I'm very skeptical of that and of anything that looks like it or sounds like it. And I think we should stay away from it and build what we believe. We know we have a challenge. We're big. British Columbia isn't the West, it's British Columbia, and it's a ways from Quebec and Ontario. We need to make a constant effort to build those bridges if we're going to be successful, and that's where I am.
Yeah. What's going on though with the crowds that are showing up for him? What do you think is there something that he's tapping into that you also see that you believe needs to be tapped into as well?
Well, the main candidates in the race, it's interesting, are all running very different campaigns. Mr. Poilievre has these meetings. Madame Leslie Lewis has worked with a lot of church groups, which is perfectly legitimate. And Patrick Brown is off the radar and working with a lot of cultural communities. And he's a formidable organizer. I don't underestimate him at all, or Mrs. Lewis, who I have a lot of respect for. And my campaign is on the ground and substance-based. I'm the one who's putting out policy. But it's about memberships in the end. We have until the 3rd of June to recruit as many people as we can to support our camps and my race. We tell people to go to jeancharest.ca, take a membership if you want to support me. And then before the 3rd of June, and then we have to convince people, get them to vote. And then, Kirk, it's a mail-in ballot. So, it's a preferential ballot. So you choose 1, 2, 3. And just to add to a bit of the story, it's 100 points per riding. So, 1,000 members in riding in Saskatchewan has the same weight as 100 members in a riding in New Brunswick. And so that's why the front runner loses in these races. The last 2 times the front runner is lost because they top out at the first ballot, and then the votes flow in the direction of whoever's the strongest.
Do you miss those delegated conventions though?
There is something about them that made them, I think, something of an event, and it aired issues. You bear in mind, Kirk, a leadership race is a test. It is a test. If it's done the right way, you test the candidates, you test the party, and you respond. It's not like an election campaign, but it's extremely important, because if you get it right, you're going to reinforce the party and make it better prepared to offer good, sound policy to Canadians and a real alternative to this Liberal government.
My last question, because I'm being encouraged by your aid to do so, to get you off to another event. I like to ask people who are going through something fairly formidable like this, leading during the pandemic, any number of things like that have really tested your own core, is what are you learning about yourself all over again?
What's interesting, Kirk, where I am at this point, I'm delivering ideas and policies that I believe in, and I'm not letting myself, I'm much more resistant to the temptation of trying to modulate because I want to, convince someone. I want to stick very, very close to what I've learned, of what my experience has been and what I believe in. So I'm staying very, very close to that. And I'm very comfortable with it.
You get what you see, and I'm not going to shape shift in order to appease you. Yeah.
That's how I feel about this race. So there's a certain level of peace and I'm very at ease with what I'm doing, and I guess it's also part of the experience of being older and having been there that allows me to have this sentiment that, you know what, in the end, it's about who I am and what I believe in, and I'm confident that people will want to support that. But at the end of the day, I'm going to continue to be who I am.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you get back to your elite athletic life.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kirk. Hope to see
Great,
you.
thank you. Thanks for your time. We'll see you again.
Bye-bye.
I'm Kirk LaPointe, publisher and editor-in-chief at BIV. Thanks for watching.